That's it. Don't come any closer. Wow. You're going to have a restaurant after that? No, but Guy's going, a colleague of mine. Guy's in. Yes. Yes. But it would probably be maybe Guy who will lead it though. I told him to go and say hello to you already. I've given him this to say hello to. Oh, I'll pass that on as well. I might have a nice activity for you to keep you busy. I knew you'd be excited. But anyway, it will need quite an explanation, so I might find you for 10 minutes tomorrow or something. Go through. I've had a chat with Jim about it, and he thinks it's a good idea, so I see what you think it's a good idea. Yeah, okay. Just warning you.
Good afternoon, you are watching Energy Island News. I'm Colin Russell. You're joining us today live from Scarlet House, where the World Council have gathered together world representatives of the three islands, Sandorra, Zania, and Nacam. For the next hour and a half, we'll be entering into intense negotiations to try and reach an agreement for a 30% reduction by 2030. The build-up to these negotiations have been overshadowed by rumours of behind-the-scenes negotiations and backhand deals. So, here to tell us more on that is our political analyst, Patrick Mason. Good afternoon, Patrick.
Good afternoon, Colin.
What should we expect from our islands as we go into these negotiations?
Well, it's difficult to know what to expect, but what we should expect is that we know which countries should be taking the lead in taking the hit on the CO2 emissions. What we know is that Sandorra is the country with the highest energy intensity, and also the country with the highest capability technologically to tackle the challenge of reducing energy intensity. We also know that Nacam, if they continue with their on their current program, could be emitting more than double the existing CO2 emissions, current CO2 emissions, by 2030, unless they make severe concessions in the negotiations this week.
Okay, so that's what we should expect. So what does that mean for the reality?
Well, of course, 30% emissions cuts is a hard ask, and of course each of these islands will have their own self-serving motivations, and they'll have their own internal political agendas, and it's difficult to see that these won't take precedence over the common goal in some cases. Excuse me. Yes, and we know that there have been behind-the-scenes talks during these negotiations where reaching an agreement on reaching the 30% target may not have actually been achieved. If we get a substantially lower target agreement, I think we should all be very disappointed, and we should be asking questions as to whether the resolve of our political leaders is good enough, and maybe even question the process itself.
Question we shall. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
I'm being told now that we're going to have a statement from the world president.
It is my pleasure to welcome you to the July 2014 meeting of the Full World Council. This is one of our most important meetings. As a planet, we face certain and significant, if not disastrous, effects from climate change. We know this, and as a result, we have set the difficult but necessary task of reducing carbon emissions by 30% by the year 2030. We have created a group of World Council experts to work with the three main islands, Sandorra, Nacam and Zania, to find a route to this goal. The word goal implies it could be a general aspiration, a hope, a thing we might get in a good day. But this is vital. So from all our people, and for the future generations to come, this is a demand. We are here to hear from the World Council Group, along with representatives from Sandorra, Zania and Nacam, to hear what has been decided. It is my fervent hope that a plan has been agreed, which will work and will make our children safe as they walk into the future. But we need real plans, plans that will work. So we must be very sure to question these representatives to make sure these plans are not empty promises, but real and innovative solutions to the most important issue which faces our planet today. Thank you.
The World Council has been working hard to meet the World President's mandate to reduce global carbon emissions 30% by 2030. Doing this quickly and radically is crucial in order to protect and preserve the planet. To do this, the World Council has been facilitating negotiations between Sandorra, Nacam and Zania to ensure realistic and viable plans are agreed upon for the future emissions reductions.
The World Council Climate Change Committee was working in cooperation with the island representatives in order to address the climate change. 2 formal meetings were held, and the pathway to achieve the goal is now established. And the most developed in technology and knowledge-equipped island, Sandorra is accepting its responsibility for a large part of carbon emissions and is ready to offer significant and ambitious cuts in the coming years, in close cooperation with the other participating islands. Realizing its difficult economic and political situation, Zania, however, is expressing its readiness to put significant efforts to improve the situation. However, it's undoubtful that economic growth and living standards improvement are still among the island's priorities. Nacam, with its boosting economy and growing population, is expected to be responsible for the major share of carbon emissions in the future. Realizing the benefits of economic growth and industrial development, the islands nevertheless needs to use climate-friendly, clear technologies to promote economic development.
The negotiations between islands has meant that the sharing of knowledge and technology has helped in reaching the common goal in cutting emissions across the planet. However, it must also be remembered that it's crucial for the islands to keep a healthy relationship between each other, as without keeping this relationship strong, we will be unable to meet the reductions that have been agreed upon to meet the 2030 targets.
The Council was impressed with the attitude of Sandorra in terms of their recognition of their emissions legacy and the subsequent willingness to take on a significant proportion of the reduction commitment. The Council was disappointed about the lack of commitment from Nacam in terms of their willingness to produce a solid strategy for mitigating their increase in emissions. We fully understand their position as a rapidly developing economy. However, we feel that more can be done to contribute, and we do not accept their laissez-faire attitude. The Council does, however, acknowledge that Nacam perhaps had the toughest job of all the islands. The Council were grateful to Zania for their willingness to share the mitigation burden. However, we know that Zania could have been stronger in the negotiation process. They were essentially viewed by the other islands as soft touch. Zania must continue to be willing to help, but also realise that they are not a dumping ground for the problems of others. Overall, the World Council is convinced that the islands are heading in the right direction. However, underhand and under-table deals between Nacam and Sandorra to withhold information from the Council not only reduces the credibility of the islands, but also serves to undermine the critical goal we are all trying to achieve.
Good afternoon. We would like to start by thanks for the three islands and the media team on their time and efforts in the past few months working together solving this global problem. And we are here today to tell you what we have done and where we are now. These are the optimistic numbers we have from three islands about what they can do before 2030. Based on the potential agreement between Sandorra and Zania about collaborating together by transforming their transportation system to electrical cars, as it is still ongoing. As you can see from here, Sandorra has taken the lead to have a 43% emission cut by 2030. Nacam has also committed to remain their carbon emission cut by 2030, and Zania has agreed to have a 10% cut by 2030. This will lead us to a 22% emission reduction on the current level by 2030. We understand a 30% cut can be an ambitious goal, but we hope in the foreseeable future there will be more collaborations and negotiations between the islands to help us to achieve the goal. We are also very glad to see in our last meeting, three countries have agreed on a coal plant treaty, where by 2030 there will be no more coal power plant built on this planet before the technology of carbon capture storage has been developed and proved efficiently. And Hannah is going to talk to you about individual islands. Thanks, Jane.
So breaking it down island by island, we are aware that Nacam are a fast developing nation, and that the amount of carbon, for them to hold their emissions at zero is actually quite a substantial reduction percentage in a way. They have established that they need to offset their coal production in the electricity sector and find a way to solve their transport solution. Zania are aware that their main emissions are within the electricity and agriculture sectors, and they're an island that relies quite heavily on agriculture. They have done some major reductions within both sectors, but they are aware that their economy still has to grow, so they're doing this in a way that is not going to damage their economic or industrial growth. Sandorra have really led the way for this, as they're aware that most of the emissions did come from them in the past. And by switching their transportation to electricity and planning to close over 80% of their coal plants, they have done a substantial emissions cut into them. So, as a World Council, we're aware that we've got to our 22%, and we've not met 30 yet, but we feel we're really taking steps in the right direction, and we can see how, with future technologies like CCS, we can easily get down to 30. Thank you, and members of the Council will take any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions from the World Council? Well, thank you very much for the presentation. If I were to be a little hard on you, I'd say you failed because you've not met your targets. What's the reason that you were prepared to accept the figure you've got?
Well, actually, thank you for the question. We've been waiting a bit. But we, as a World Council, we assume the responsibility for the future of our nations and our children, and we are here to set ambitious goals. And like my colleague said, we think that the 30% cut is very ambitious, and with the help of the future technology, it is basically achievable. So we are quite confident that with following discussions, we can move on a bit.
Any other questions? Yes.
I was intrigued about the reference to underhand tactics. Can you shed a little bit more light on that?
We held different conversations with the countries, and we define specific technical goals which will be like helping each of the countries to achieve the closest possible realistic targets. This was the way we built up our numbers. I think in every country we receive a good and positive collaboration and contribution in order to achieve this challenge.
You sounded a bit like a diplomat there. I'm not sure you answered the question.
Well, basically, it's technical contribution, sitting with them, analyzing numbers, making sure that the technological options that each country can receive and can make according to what the actual situation looks like, it's going to be feasible and implemented in real time.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Yeah.
I was wondering whether you'd explored other parameters, shall we say, to judge the fairness of the targets that you're looking at. For example, CO2 on a per capita basis, particularly looking at, we're talking about how big the country is, but it's a fast developing country. Where will each of the islands be by 2030 on that basis?
So basically, that's the reason why the scenarios are presented in the way that they were, right? That actually maintaining the level of emissions in Nacam means actually a cut in the emissions, because we respect the level of development, and we work with quite precise numbers of the future development. So we took this into account for these scenarios. So yes, to answer the short answer to your questions is yes, we took into account the individual and per capita emissions.
Okay, so can I ask another question? So by 2030, you've got a total population for the 3 islands. You know what the figure needs to be. Divide that figure by the total population. There's your answer.
Yeah, basically, that's of course that's perfectly true. But we have to take into account where are the possibilities and what are the desires of the respective nations. So we can't really undermine the development in each on each island just for the sake of a common goal. So each island has to take its responsibility, has to take a burden of the future goal.
But you've missed your goal, haven't you? Is that right?
Well, I wouldn't call it a miss. I'm pretty confident with what we actually achieved. As I said, we are here to set ambitious goals, and to be honest, I think that the 22% is quite a good achievement, taking into account what we have in our hands right now.
You've got political ambitions.
Yes. As you're aware, the Global Council has declared a decade of sustainable energy for all, and we know that in Zambia there are a large number of people that don't have access to modern energy services. So have you been able to agree that you will ensure that everyone on the 3 islands has access to modern energy services and meet your targets, which you say you will eventually?
Yes. What we decided, or what the island decided, was basically to receive, or let's put it like this, that Zania will receive investment from the other 2 islands in order to develop in a renewable manner, specifically the renewable energy sources that they have, like wind energy or hydro. So they are kind of ambitious to make this happen, but it's going to be a step-by-step process.
Thank you. I think we've run out of time. Thank you. We can move on to the
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're going to be hosting 20 mayors of the energy island of Zania, and they will be giving us their opinion on the current situation. Secretary of State for Scottish, are the expected use population of Zania after the state of America?
Well, I think short-term developments are key aspects of the developments in Zania. We just came from decades of devastating corruption, and we're at the beginning of a very fragile recovery. So I think for the short term, our main goals should be education and economic development.
What would be the consequences?
Well, we should not lose track of sustainability. And for that, we're very dependent on the experience of other nations, because we do not want to make the same mistakes they made. So the government of Zania is very pleased that negotiations over the last couple of days have not only focused on reduction of emissions, but also on sustainable development for Zania.
Thank you very much. President Komola, recently elected by the entire population of Zania, is the new face of hope and change.
So it's all thanks to the democracy, this new democracy. I want to be very, our priority is to protect the
We want to make you proud. We want to make sure that development comes to our land. We will not let you down. The current emission of our country is just a few percentage. And then we will make sure that the development will be to your favor. You will have free schools, because we understand that our people cannot send their children to school. We want to assure you that we will not let you down. We are assuring you that this government is here for you and for you. We are Zanians, and we must put hands together to make sure that we develop Zanians. Great Zanians, glory to Zania,
is to bring out exploitation of island natural resources without stripping the country in terms of land and money. It will also have to contribute to reduce global CO2 emissions and satisfy the global demand that will change. Only time will tell. Thank you for your attention. This was Lucia Pereira from Zania.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Program Director. We are Zania Island. We have been politically unstable over the past number of years, until 4 years when we managed to elect a capable and innovative president. We are determined to grow and develop our country, and we are basically agriculture and mineral resource based economy. We are going to contribute to the achievement of the Welcome Fell target of 50% by 2030. Furthermore, we have managed to conclude great deals with Sandorra and Nacam Island. My colleague will elaborate further on the programs that we are going to embark on in order to develop our country and contribute to the 30% target by 2030.
Thank you very much. After long negotiations, we have come to an agreement. Together, with the help of our friends Sandorra and Nacam, we will build more schools and more hospitals. This, in turn, will lead to improved healthcare and education. Together, we will increase employment and professional development of our workforce in order to fuel economic growth. Sandorra and Nacam have agreed to help us, more specifically with the electrical grid development, all that by investing into solar and wind resources. We believe this will greatly help to decarbonize our electrical grid. Our transport sector will see the fleet of road vehicles increase in the short term. This is because we will be importing more vehicles from Sandorra, but eventually we will seek to switch to electric vehicles as part of our commitment to reduce CO2 emission in the long run. Our workforce needs improved working conditions in the multinational companies, and this is something both countries recognize. The impact of these measures means we will be looking at an 80% decrease in our emissions in 2030 as more renewables get into the grid. The industry will expect a massive growth, which in turn will lead to an increase in emissions. Residential will also see an increase in emissions as people move from rural to urban areas. Transport will see significant increase. As mentioned earlier, we will be having a fleet of cars imported from Sandorra to help with development. Agriculture, on the other hand, will see a decrease as we implement more sustainable and efficient practices. To conclude, we know we're not a rich country, but we have a vision. Our road to a safer planet is long and hard, but if we work together, we can do it. Glory to Zania. Super.
Do we have a question for Zania?
Thank you very much. You spoke very kindly about the assistance you're getting from the other two islands, particularly Sandorra. But do you really feel they're living up to their historic responsibility for climate change, particularly Sandorra and now Nacam? Are they doing enough?
In the negotiations process, we have put our aim on developing our country. And from the first point on, Sandorra has mentioned that they want us to help to not make the same mistakes they have done in the past, but directly grow in a sustainable way. And this has been come to the agreement with them by developing mainly our electric network for power production and for the transport sector. So we think they have greatly done a good job in taking responsibility for their past emissions and for us to help not to do the same mistake, but grow in a sustainable way.
The second question? Yeah.
What do you think the impacts will be on your country of the emissions targets not being met?
There's been a lot of hope into the development of the technology of carbon capture and storage. And I think we all put a lot of, didn't put all of our eggs in that basket, but we're all hoping that that will come through in the end. I know the Sandorran people are developing that technology, and the carbon will be transported to Zania in our, we have quite a large area for carbon capture storage. So, as you say, the risk of our landscape being scarred is quite high. However, the reduction in agriculture, our infrastructure is going to be improved, and therefore our agriculture is going to drop. And hopefully we can be able to reclaim some of the lands and reappropriate those to what was once being developed for food. Now, hopefully more efficiently, we'll have more lands, giving us more of a beautiful landscape back to help our tourism industry as well. So although it is a risk, we're all aware that it's a very serious problem. So by trying to minimise that risk as much as we can. I hope that answers the question.
It was more a question of what the impacts of climate change. Like, climate change, so 30% emissions target isn't being reached.
So Zania gets a lot of money from his tourism. Let me just think. Climate change. So an effect on the agriculture. Do you want to take this?
I mean, our country has been very hardly affected by climate change. We can see this in our agricultural sector. But with the means and the technical knowledge that Sandorra and also Nacam will bring into our country, we will make sure that the agriculture can take all the effects from climate change. And by also, we have taken out all the military expenses in our country and invest this now in environmental protection measures. And together with the improving technology we have, we can deal with climate change adaptation and also mitigation.
Do we have another question?
Could I ask a question, firstly, just a clarification and then a fact? When I looked at your emissions reductions, they all seem to be predominantly emissions increases, and I didn't quite understand how you were going to actually reduce emissions, so that's clarification. And then you put a lot of reliance upon solar PV and wind and other technologies which are much more expensive than the ones you're going to replace. What measures do you have in mind to make this affordable to your population?
So we have a lot of trade agreements with Nacam and Sandorra based on their developing our renewable resources. So they're not only installing these huge renewable resources, which I'm sure Sandorra will tell you about specifically, but they're also going to provide us with jobs, employment, and also education. The reduction that we have been able to show, the 10%, 50% of our emissions came from agriculture. So just that 20% reduction is so significant. The 3 raises in residential, transport, and industry are all kept, and I think we're very proud of ourselves to actually reduce our overall emissions when it was probably expected that we wouldn't be able to.
Okay, thank you very much, Zania.
I helped Sandorra meet the 30-30 target by reducing consumption and cutting out food waste.
J'ai aidé Sandorra à accomplir le challenge 3030 en investissant dans plus de 10 millions d'emplois écologiques.
من به ساندورا کمک کردم که چالش 3030 رو با موفقیت پشت سر بذاره با مقاوم‌سازی خونه‌مون.
Sandorra Ağustos mücadelesinde rüzgar türbinini kurarak yardımcı oldum.
What did you do?
I helped Sandorra meet the 30-30 challenge by driving an electric car and cycling to work.
Yo ayudé a que Sandorra alcanzara la meta 30-30, mejorando la calidad de vida en Zania mediante tecnologías limpias.
Ho aiutato Sandorra a raggiungere l'obiettivo del 30-30 preservando l'ambiente per i nostri figli.
আমি সান্দোরা 2030 সালের লক্ষ্যের জন্য ভবিষ্যৎ প্রজন্মকে শিক্ষা দান করছি।
What did you do?
I helped Sandorra to meet the 30-30 challenge by planting food crops which are resistant to a changing climate.
Yo ayudo a Sandorra a cumplir el reto 30-30
diseñando plantas de energía solar fotovoltaica.
Ich helfe Sandorra, sich der 30-30-Herausforderung zu stellen, indem ich eine CO2-arme industrielle Revolution schaffe.
I help Sandorra meet the 30-30 challenge by creating a resilient electricity network.
We are committed to a 30% carbon reduction by 2030.
We are one nation, within one world. We are Sandorra. We are united against climate change.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed representatives, on behalf of the great nation of Sandorra, it is my privilege to be able to deliver our vision for a global carbon reduction emissions agreement. When Sandorran scientists first discovered the threat of climate change, we realised that this represented an unprecedented global challenge, which would require an unprecedented global cooperative agreement. And it's our part in this which we would like to deliver for you today. Meeting this challenge will require a holistic approach, both within and across our borders. Internationally, we aim to share skills, technologies, and capacity with the other nations. We're using our considerable technological expertise to help build the world's largest ever solar farm in the deserts in the north of Zania. The capacity from this solar farm will enable Sandorra to meet 7% of its electricity consumption just from the Zanian deserts by 2030, whilst still enabling capacity to go to the inhabitants of Zania to help them to improve their energy access. More than this, we will build this project using local labour and local skills. We're investing heavily in education programs, and we're also building schools and hospitals to help Zania to develop. We are also investigating the possibility of collaborative agreements for CCS projects with both Zania and Nacam. We hope that by working together, we can enable these nations to develop in a clean and sustainable manner.
Thanks. We expect to see reductions across all of our sectors. In the electricity sector, we expect a 55% decrease. 80% of our coal plants will be decommissioned, and that will be replaced with renewable energy from on and offshore wind and biomass. The remaining 20% will be fitted with CCS. We also expect 35% from local renewable generation. In the residential sector, we will reduce the demand for heat and then meet the remainder with CHP plants and also heat pumps. We'll also increase our building efficiency measures and regulations. In the transport sector, we expect a 30% decrease. We'll electrify our rail network as well as increase our fleet of electric vehicles. We expect ownership of cars to remain roughly stable. We want to halve the number of journeys taken. Our public's very environmentally minded, and they've responded positively to similar measures in the past.
Now, clearly, this kind of transition is going to involve considerable capital expenditure. Fortunately for us, recent highly successful peace negotiations with the other islands mean that we feel confident that we can scale back our nuclear deterrent and also pull out of some military interventions overseas. This is going to free up an estimated 80 billion Sandorran dollars to be spent on energy, health, education, and industry and infrastructure. And 25% of these funds have been earmarked for clean development, both within Sandorra and overseas. Thank you very much, and we welcome your questions.
Do we have any questions for Sandorra? Yes.
Yeah. Just because you have a very strong media marketing team, does that really just hide your level of ambition? Having visited other planets for the last 4 years that have undertaken similar activities, I don't think I've ever seen any planet ensure that the least developed country actually reduces their per capita emissions. And basically, that level of ambition is shown by the lack of decarbonisation in your electricity sector. How do you live with yourselves?
So I was hoping that our media campaign would be actually backed up by the development of real policies and because I wasn't involved in development. So that's a question.
Yeah, for example, when it comes to deploying the market creation of renewable energy sources, we would like to implement really very good, successful, effective policy instruments, like we call it feed-in tariff system. So there are some advantages, like we'll have a predictable 20-year feed-in tariff. Our utilities will be obliged to connect and purchase all renewable energy power, and we will, for example, grant priority dispatch for renewable energy sources. So.
We have another question. Yes.
Yeah, so Sandorra is trying to get over an economic kind of slump. It's in a very competitive situation with Nacam. The political emphasis is on economic growth and recovery, and keeping industry in your borders rather than allowing them to go off to Nacam, who've got much less stringent targets. So how far out do you think your publics are with you on this, and how do you allow for the possibility of unravelling of the political consensus that you've established?
Thank you for your question. As you have seen in the video that we have delivered according to the vision of our media manager, we are fully committed and concerned so that our people understand that this is not just an internal affair, this is an international challenge that all the world is facing. We are doing that fully concerned of the need of our economy to grow, and we think that this the path that we are showing is providing real opportunity both for our country, for our industry, and both for the industry of the other countries and the other islands. So we think that cooperation is the best way that can let the world achieve this challenge in a sustainable and economically viable way. Thank you.
Another question? Yes, thank you.
By giving away your technologies to other countries, aren't you then undermining the incentives for investment in innovation and technological development? And so, although you're generous in the short term, are you actually putting at risk the very technologies that will enable decarbonisation that we know is needed beyond 2030?
I believe that we are maintaining the IPR for the infrastructure, although we're giving the information to enable them to develop them in other countries. You have to stay ahead of your competitors by continually developing, therefore you do not stand still. So the fact that we give them information today does not mean we can't stay ahead in the future.
We are a prosperous island. In the last decade, we have transitioned from a developing nation to a rapidly growing economic power. This will continue, leading to a more prosperous nation, better health, education, life expectancy, and improved living standards. Our people have a vast wealth of skills. We intend to use these skills to deploy renewable energy like hydro, wind, and solar, and through these we will continue to grow our nation. Our friends Windy and Sunny will explain how.
Hi, I'm Windy the Wind Turbine.
Hey Windy, nice to meet you. I'm Penny, a PV photovoltaic panel. Our existing coal infrastructure is great, but we'll need 50% more electricity by 2030. We need to figure out how to get this in a clean and sustainable way.
To meet this, we can manufacture wind turbines which produce power from wind and new solar panels which will help create new jobs and growth for our economy too.
With more people moving to our urban cities from the rural areas, we'll also be investing in our transportation system. In our cities, we want to enhance the air quality, so we'll be creating networks of cycle paths and priority areas for pedestrians that make it easy and enjoyable to experience your cities on foot. In addition, we will be improving our public transportation system, which will again create jobs for our people. Buses will be accessible, affordable, and abundant. Our existing electric train network will be developed to link major hubs of activity between our growing cities. This will be more efficient and easier than travelling by plane. All these measures not only provide new jobs and contribute to our growth, but are important for our environment. We are committed to a green future for our nation and our children. In the words of our esteemed President, Gan Alonga,
we want to build our economy and give our people a good standard of living. We want to do all this while maintaining the health of our land and our planet.
The world needs to cut emissions by 30% by 2030 to ensure a sustainable future. We need to decouple our emissions from our growth to ensure that this happens. We have a responsibility to grow in an environmentally friendly way, unlike some of our other nations' historic record. Nacam will be world leaders in sustainable growth. Others have shown disregard for our planet in the past, not thinking about what impact their selfish development will have on our children. Their industry has needlessly polluted our air, impacting our health. Increases in emissions will lead to global warming, melting ice caps, and destroyed environments. If we act now, we can stop this. Now is our time to show leadership for a green future.
In this infomercial have been obtained with or without consent from YouTube. Please contact Nacam Media representatives for full listings.
Dear World Council delegates, dear Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen, during our negotiation from the last few months, we have visited the islands of Sandorra and Zania. We have witnessed the sober reality of changing the climate of these both islands. Believe us, we are seriously concerned about the health and the future of Nacam's future generation as well. For many years, we have put a lot of efforts to find our place in the world, to ensure work and prosperity for our people. Now, when we are becoming an important factor in the world's economy, with an yearly economic growth of 8% per year, how can we explain to our people to forgo the privileges advancing islands have enjoyed for years? After long discussions, elaboration of different scenarios, and serious efforts by our experts, we conclude that the reduction of the CO2, which were emitted for decades by the advanced countries, is absolutely challenging within the short period of 15 years. Please have a look at the breakdown of the historical emission by islands. So Nacam's share is colored in gray, and the blue section is Sandorra's emissions development. Everything what happened at the beginning of the century is relevant today.
So to demonstrate the enormous challenge faced by the people of Nacam, you can see a breakdown of our business as usual emissions levels in 2030. Without the concerted efforts of the Nacamese government on behalf of the Nacamese people, best available information combined with the best available experts forecast that our emissions will more than double by 2030 in the business as usual scenario. This slide shows our ambitious plans to decouple our economic growth from our emissions. This will involve renewable energy, expansion in hydroelectric power, an extensive research and development program in emerging technologies. In recent years, Nacam has transitioned from a developing island to a major prosperous nation. We will lead the world in green growth, benefiting both the environment and the economy. New renewable technologies will be manufactured by our skilled workforce and exported to neighbouring islands to allow them to reach their emission targets, whilst creating new jobs for the people of Nacam. Furthermore, our commitment to our manufacturing industries Exporting goods to our neighbours will enable other islands to reduce their emissions further in order to meet the global ambitious targets. Thank you.
Do we have a question for Nacam? Thank you.
In your promotional video, you were very critical about countries that have developed earlier than you and polluting not only their planet but yours too. So I guess it's a version of the same question I asked earlier. Do you think they've done enough, both about their own emissions to compensate for that historical responsibility, but are they going to have to help you in your development quest?
I'd be happy to take that question. I think we must emphasize that the Nacamese efforts are substantial, and if we dig into the numbers in more detail, I will show that this, to the Nacamese economy, is a substantial effort. I don't think that it is seen by the islands of Sandorra to the extent that we would feel it. And I don't think that Sandorra actually, or I think that Sandorra is could actually do more increased effort and should do that, especially within their electricity sector. I acknowledge that they support Zania, but they should do more on their own time.
Thank you. Another question?
Yeah, my question is, I take your point that by 2030, all you're agreeing to do is to not increase your emissions, albeit against the business as usual, it's a sort of effectively a decrease. But at what point in the future would you see that your country should be responsible for actually some absolute reductions in CO2 emissions? How far beyond 2030, really?
So we would see this as a challenge for the whole world to reduce beyond 2030. We are in discussions across all three of our islands about carbon capture and storage technology, and our existing electricity infrastructure is completely coal at the moment. So we do see in the future that we can make a significant contribution. So it depends on as and when the technology develops. But we see that we will make a significant cut as we move into the future, but just acknowledge that while we are still developing, it's not our responsibility at the moment.
So no date then, no?
So when you're going to just switch from coal to gas, I mean, there's going to be loads of cheap gas around in the future. You don't need to do all this expensive renewables and other stuff, electrification, transport, everything. Have you looked into scenarios that allow you to just do fossil fuel switching and still achieve the kinds of reductions you need to achieve to 2030?
This far we have focused on, I mean, you have to acknowledge that we have a rather new infrastructure in the production of power from coal. We would actually prefer to continue using this very modern infrastructure. I think we can say that these are the most modern coal-fired plants on all the three islands on this world. Switching to gas would definitely be an option, and maybe more economic in the short term as compared to the development of renewables. However, we see also, referring to the question that we got before, that in the long run we need to also take responsibility for the emissions that develop from these gas infrastructure, and therefore we see a better future for the development of renewable technology.
One more question, yeah?
When I look at Sandorra, it's made a real effort
to help Zania and essentially recognise that its responsibilities extend beyond its island. You seem totally focused on your own island. Your whole focus seems to be making sure you meet with the needs, and that's it. And it seems a bit selfish to me, and I just wonder whether there are opportunities that you could have looked at with working with Zania. Zania has recognised, the husband proudly announced the relationship with Sandorra, and you don't seem to have done that.
Well, I think there's been a bit of, they're not giving all the information maybe. So in terms of the continued relations in terms of trade, we've offered them significant expertise in manufacturing. So we're kind of the world's manufacturing centre. We've offered to give them manufacturing expertise so they could develop their own economy, build their own infrastructure. We've offered to buy renewably generated electricity from them to help decarbonise our society. We've offered them schools, infrastructure, so we have given them quite a lot really in return for the things they've offered us. And bear in mind that Sandorra are a lot further developed than us, and we're still trying to develop. So I think given our position, we've actually been quite generous to Zania, and we would like to see them grow so that everyone can prosper in that new world.
Thank you very much, Nathan.
Good afternoon and welcome to Energy Island News. Today we have a special program covering recent negotiations between Sandorra, Zania and Nacam requested by the World Council in order to cut carbon emissions by 30% by 2030. But what has truly happened behind the scenes? Have transparency and trust been overlooked? Our correspondent Julia in Scarman House has all the details.
Over the past week, we have been closely following the negotiations in here, Scarman House, where the World Council and the main authorities from Nacam and Sandorra and Zania have met to agree the targets and measures to reduce carbon emissions. The highest expectations are in Sandorra as the most developed country, while Nacam poses a threat given its high-level consumptions of coal, and Zania could potentially be the deal breaker. There are high economic and social interests at stake, and therefore increasing fees that the parties haven't been as transparent as the public would wish. Julia for Energy Island.
In the negotiation of Sandorra. Sandorra have the highest energy consumption per capita in the world. Some are saying that being the richest and most energy intensive, they have a duty and a responsibility to cut their emissions. While Sandorra is an established player in the world's economy, Nacam is a rapidly expanding economy that is being fueled with dirty coal power generation. Unless they move away from burning fossil fuels, their CO2 emissions will be more than twice that of the rest of the world.
Sandorra and Nacam are two of the more developed islands. The third island, Zania, on the other hand, is the poorest country in the world with currently the lowest CO2 emissions. Despite, or perhaps because of this, it seems that Zania has positioned themselves to be the deal breakers.
The latest information suggests that the deal has been negotiated over the last few days in secret and to the exclusion of Nacam and the world's press. Energy experts agree that such a lack of transparency and self-serving political manoeuvring have corrupted the negotiation process. As such, can the negotiations in today's meeting be for the benefit of all the islands and the world? Or have the decisions already been made behind closed doors? Can we really trust our political leaders to do the right thing?
In sports news, Sandorra defeats Nacam 7-1.
Media, you've been a busy group following this negotiation and playing your part in this negotiation. Can I just ask you, how did you cultivate good contacts with the islands and the World Council? We look like you can answer that.
Well, we tried to be friendly, which worked with some of the islands and the World Council, even though it was very tough to connect and to get good connections. We got some good connections, but they didn't really want to give us any information. So I guess we should have played harder, I think.
Was it difficult to get the truth?
Yes. Yeah, there was so many rumors, and we didn't know who to believe, and yeah, it was a mess.
What did you do? Perhaps some hands up for us. What did you do to get to the truth?
As a media organisation, we don't necessarily need the truth.
Would you say you're responsible?
We may have some road reforms.
Did you have the same kind of relations with all of the countries at the World Council? And did you maintain fairness in your reporting?
Well, yeah, we try, although there are different people, different cultures, so we try to approach us bearing in mind their cultures, but sometimes, as our colleague was saying before, some people are more approachable than others, and sometimes you don't know whether you're receiving the fair information or not. So,
any questions from the floor for the media?
So, do you think you were observing what was happening, or was your presence influencing what was happening?
I think in this scenario, our presence wasn't influencing what was happening, but in reality it should.
Okay, I think that's all.
Well, just a question. I noticed the other day in your globally circulated newspaper that on page 1 you did indeed lead these negotiations, but on the following page there was an article about some obscure study somewhere that had decided that climate change was in fact man was not responsible for climatic change, and you were fueling some uncertainty about the science. So I just wondered if you could give us an explanation honestly on how you actually are dealing with that uncertainty.
Would someone like to take that question?
Yes, an earlier question asked whether we were a responsible media organisation, and from the point of view of reporting climate change, I sincerely uphold the policy as editor-in-chief. The policy of the organisation is to try and educate the public properly on these issues. And so we are running a number of documentaries with interviews with senior academics on this issue in our television network. We do have another branch of the media organisation, which is a right-wing tabloid, and in that one we're going to deny climate change. So.
Thank you very much, media. Thank you.
We may not have achieved the target. We may not have found the answer we were looking for, but the hard work that has gone into these discussions has perhaps provided something greater. I speak of hope. Hope that the seeds from these discussions will grow into something bigger, that these collaborations will develop into something more. Hope that these people will work together. Hope the nations will look beyond their borders and try and create something together. This is not false hope. These people are not clutching at easy options. They are not looking for quick wins. They are not looking at pipe dreams. But they are providing real hope for a brighter tomorrow for the generations to come. Thank you.
That concludes our presentations this afternoon. Thank you for being good sports and joining in with us and asking your questions. Very much appreciated. And I hope you agree with me that they've made a great performance. And they clearly knew a lot of their stuff, even though they were quite clever at evading some of them. We're going to do a debrief now. So if you'd like to leave us to do that, that would be fantastic. But thank you again for your help.